What is prostitution?
Prostitution is the practice of engaging in relatively indiscriminate sexual activity. In general, with someone who is not a spouse or a friend, in exchange for immediate payment in money or other valuables. Prostitutes may be female or male or transgender and may entail heterosexual or homosexual activity, but historically most prostitutes have been women and most clients men.
Prostitution in perspective of law. There are sections related to acts connected with prostitution. The Penal Code does define prostitution in section 372 in bracket 3, which states that prostitution is an act of someone selling their body for sexual gratification, whether in return for money or something of the same kind. The laws surrounding prostitution have created a situation where prostitution is neither legal nor illegal, but is instead restricted. While there are no specific laws making prostitution illegal, the usual situations leading up to prostitution are covered under the Penal Code. One of the biggest problems around prostitution is human trafficking. Under Section 372, which is penalizing trading, including buying, selling, hiring for the purpose of prostitution. Secondly, trafficking, harboring, or restraining any persons for the purpose of prostitution. It even covers pimps offering prostitution services to people. Under Section 372 in bracket 1E provides that as long as the pimps advertise it in a manner that a reasonable man would know that it is for prostitution, he will be caught. Aside from Section 372 prohibiting pimps from advertising prostitution, it also prohibits you from seeking information for the purpose of prostitution or to accept advertisement notices or displays related to prostitution. Section 372B covers the solicitation of prostitution. It is unclear whether Malaysia's legal definition of solicitation includes looking for prostitutes. Section 372B is about whoever solicits or importunes for the purpose of prostitution or any immoral purpose in any place shall be punished with imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year or with fine or with both. So, we can conclude that prostitution in Malaysia is restricted. It is not easy to live the life of a prostitute, as even if it is a life that was freely chosen. A lot of rules governs and controls what can be done. The laws appear to be aimed at preventing the trafficking and exploitation of individuals into the life of prostitution, and also to draw a line between legality and morality. It has to be understood that while morality can influence laws, legality and morality are two separate issues.
One of the cases that is related to prostitution is LAW034 and Anor versus Public Prosecutor. The appellant in this case is LAW034 and Wong Si Cheong. They appealed against the decision of the learned magistrate who had on 29 June 1998. They were convicted of 4 out of 5 charges of knowingly living on the earnings of the prostitution of 4 persons under Section 19(1) of the Women and Girls Protection Act 1973. The appellants and another accused were jointly charged and tried in respect of 5 charges. The other accused was acquitted of all 5 charges. The employer of the appellants was the person whom the 4 prostitutes were under a 3-month contract to work for. However, it was the appellants who transport the 4 prostitutes from house to the client in hotels. After requests for such service were received by the appellants would, after the 4 prostitutes had rendered their service, transport them home. The appellants told the prostitute how much to charge for the service, and one of the appellants would receive payment direct from the clients and the money would later be paid over to the employer. He would at the end of the 3-month contract pay the prostitute. The prosecution had relied on Section 19(3) of the Act, which says, where any person is proved to live with or be habitually in the company of a prostitute or prostitutes, or to have exercise control, direction, or influence of the movements of a prostitute or prostitutes in such a manner as to show that such person is aiding, abetting, or compelling her or their prostitution with any other person, or generally such person shall, in the absence of proof to the contrary, be deemed to be knowingly living on the earnings of prostitution. According to section 372 of the Penal Code, whoever knowingly lives wholly or in part on the earnings of the prostitution of another person shall be punished with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 15 years and with whipping, and shall also be liable to a fine. The learned counsel for the appellants contended that the presumption was rebutted by the prosecution evidence that the prostitutes were not employed by the appellants, but the appellant employer, and he was the one who eventually got the money paid by the clients and would eventually pay the prostitutes. There is no evidence to show that the appellants had benefit or derived any income from the earnings, and the appellants were knowingly living on the earnings of prostitution. The learned magistrate made an order that the appellants be discharged and acquitted. The public prosecutor does not provide enough evidence to show that the appellants are guilty in this case, which result to the appellants be discharged and acquitted.
Prostitution is a controversial issue in the most countries. Not only that, prostitution is legal and lawful in a few places and regarded as a profession, while it is a crime punishable by death in some other places. In Saudi Arabia, prostitution is illegal. Basically, prostitution is punishable by prison and flogging. However, in April of 2020, flogging punishment was abolished by the order of the Saudi Supreme Court General Commission, and now is only limited to imprisonment or fines. Prostitution has been common in Thailand. Long time ago, prostitution was legal, but nowadays prostitution is illegal in Thailand. The legal framework on prostitution in Thailand is based on 3 acts. Prostitution is prohibited under the law, but there are some exceptions. For example, karaoke bars and massage centers can be registered as legitimate and regular businesses. When the arrest of sex workers take place in such premises, the police usually consider the prostitution as an exchange between sex workers and customers.
In Juris' opinion under morality, Thomas Aquinas said that humans should act in the way that fulfill the function of humans. Every act of human beings should be conducive to that purpose, since everything human does impact his or her function. H.L.A. Hart, the positivist, said that if a person commits an immoral act that is contrary to the moral code, then society as a whole will collapse. H.L.A. Hart and Patrick Devlin said that protect the citizens from indecency and annoyance is the purpose of law. The party offended should be the one punished. Prostitution is something that offends the public, so the prostitute should be punished. To relate with the jury's opinion, we can see that prostitution is wrong and immoral because prostitution can be categorized as indecency, and also it does not fulfill the function of humans. It should be done only in a manner consistent with its purpose when one performs a sexual act. Reproduction and the upbringing of that offspring in a marriage is the function of sex. Therefore, any type of sex other than this does not serve the function and is morally wrong. Prostitution is really contravened from the moral act, and it will cause damage to the society.
Ya, saya setuju. Masyarakat kita memang perlu untuk didedahkan tentang kegiatan dunia pelacuran itu. Sebab apa? Mungkin secara luaran dan lahiriahnya, masyarakat kita ada yang beranggapan, oh dunia pelacuran ni cara mudah untuk kita dapatkan sumber pendapatan, duit dan sebagainya. Namun di sebaliknya, akibat yang perlu untuk mereka tanggung dalam kesan jangka masa yang panjang adalah banyak sebenarnya penyakit yang berpunca daripada pelacuran ini yang tak ada penawar pun. Contoh macam penyakit STD, HIV, AIDS dan sebagainya. Jadi, andai kata masyarakat kita didedahkan, masyarakat kita terdidik dan sedar, mereka tidak lagi akan melihat pelacuran ini sebagai kegiatan yang bermoral dan...
I don't agree with the statement that the society nowadays is exposed with the issue of prostitution, because I think the only thing that society knows, or the average person would know, is that prostitution, especially in Malaysia, is illegal and it's not a well-respected job. But they don't know the underlying issues regarding prostitution. For example, do these people, regardless of men or women in prostitution, suffer exploitation, or how they get into the business in the first place? So I think society should have the initiative to learn more about this issue.
Bagi saya, sekalipun kita membenarkan kegiatan pelacuran ini dalam negara Malaysia, masalah jenayah rogol ini tidak akan berkurang pun. Sebab jenayah rogol ini berpunca daripada moral seseorang individu itu sendiri. Maksudnya, sekalipun pelacuran itu sah di sisi undang-undang, andai kata seseorang itu ingin bertindak, melanggar undang-undang dan melakukan jenayah rogol itu, mereka tetap boleh melakukannya.
To reducing rape cases, I think prostitution can be used in order to do so, because now people have the option to buy sex instead of forcing sex onto the other person, which will make them into rapists and would exploit the other person more. Now people have an outlet for their sexual desires, and if they can pay, then they can have it. But I think when you legalize prostitution, you can reduce the amount of rape cases. For example, what happened in Rhode Island, when they legalized prostitution, the amount of rape cases decreased sharply. But I think it will create another issue where prostitutes are now seen as a commodity and no longer as humans, which would further degrade their image and lower their status, because now people only see them as an outlet for their sexual desires. So I think, yeah, it can reduce rape cases, but it will lead to a number of problems. Yeah, you can protect sex workers better, but their perspective in society's eyes might only just worsen. That's it.
Pendapat saya, sebenarnya kenapa masyarakat boleh terlibat dalam kancah dunia pelacuran ini adalah faktor keterdesakan kewangan yang menekan mereka, yang menyebabkan mereka tiada pilihan dan melihat dunia pelacuran ini sebagai jalan pintas dan jalan mudah untuk mereka mendapatkan duit, sumber pendapatan dan sebagainya.
People who opt into prostitution, according to research, like 80% of these people who opt into prostitution have traumatic backgrounds. For example, they were sexually assaulted when they were a kid, or they were molested or suffer from drug addiction from they were young. So these people would result into prostitution to fulfill their needs and to get money. And only a small amount of people do it by choice because of certain circumstances, for example, discrimination in the workplace, or their lack of skills and job opportunities that they can get when they are adults. So I think most people go into prostitution out of desperation for money, and because of the things that happened in the past leads them into going into prostitution. And there's also a percentage of people who go into prostitution due to human trafficking.
aspek penyelundupan manusia pula, jawapan saya masih sama. Sebab dari kegiatan penyelundupan manusia itu, dia ada golongan sasaran. Maksudnya, mangsa terdiri daripada kanak-kanak, wanita dan lelaki juga tidak terkecuali. Jadi, ia membuktikan, membenarkan kegiatan pelacuran di sisi undang-undang takkan menyelesaikan penyelundupan manusia.
When it comes to this issue, personally, I think that legalizing prostitution can reduce the amount of human trafficking simply because the government now oversees the industry and can enforce laws regarding prostitution, human trafficking, etc. better on this industry, and would have like heavier punishment and better enforcement towards brothels and pimps who employ these prostitutes, and this would lead to lesser cases of human trafficking, because now the government would actively crack down on human trafficking in the prostitution industry, because now they have like records of everything. They can easily monitor these brothels. Another perspective on this issue is that it wouldn't necessarily lessen the human trafficking issue, simply because when you legalize prostitution, the demand for prostitutes would be higher, and since it's not really a well-respected job, right, prostitution, there will not be enough people to cater to the high demand, especially in like societies where religion and morals is not really upheld. In much more liberal societies, the demand will be much higher. So yeah, this would lead to brothels resulting in or going into human trafficking to get more workers.
Based on the jury's opinions, prostitution is immoral because it involves sex to gain money, particularly those with traditional religious belief, and they consider prostitution a sign of the moral collapse of the society. Some countries illegal prostitution, such as India, Russia, Brazil and Morocco, but there are some countries legalize the prostitution, such as Germany, New Zealand, Australia. In some nations, the death penalty may be incurred in some jurisdiction. It is a felony punishable by incarceration, and in others, it is a lesser administrative offence punishable by a fine. In Malaysia, although prostitution is not illegal, it is still illegal to run establishments which may link clients with sex workers. As a result, prostitution is an underground sex trade that is hard to monitor and control. Prostitution can be prevented as number 1, enforcing the law; number 2, do a campaign to reveal the prostitution to the teenagers, in essence the consequences regarding that issue; number 3, efforts to monitor those places identified as having to do with prostitution activities. These efforts will be monitored by City Council, cooperate with the police. And lastly, the number 4 is an act by making a report to authorities on prostitution activities in their own areas.